Hello, movie nerds, and welcome to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I am your host. On today's episode, we are going to spin back to my actors that have played in Star Wars films and talk about my favorite Carrie Fisher movie. Now, as far as Carrie Fisher goes as a lead actress, she will always be Princess Leia for me. She is queen. She's queen of Star Wars, and that will never, ever, ever change. But as far as like movies that I remember seeing her in outside of Star Wars that I really, really loved, my favorite movie of Carrie Fisher's was a film called Drop Dead Fred. And it came out in 1991. I would have been about 10 years old, I think, when this movie came out. And Carrie Fisher is not a main character. She plays the best friend of the main character. So Drop Dead Fred, for those of you who haven't seen it, for one, let me just side note, go watch it. You will not regret it. I promise you, you'll laugh your butt off. But so Drop Dead Fred basically focuses around this character, Elizabeth. And you get to see her kind of at two different times. The child version of Elizabeth is played by Ashley Peldon, and she does an amazing, amazing job. You will probably recognize her if you see her. She was in a lot of stuff when she was younger. And then the adult version of Elizabeth is played by Phoebe Cates. And Phoebe Cates was in like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. She was in a couple of other things. You definitely would probably recognize her as well. So basically what the story kind of circles around is Elizabeth, and her home life is less than ideal. Her mom is extremely controlling. Her dad is kind of not very much in the picture. And she has an imaginary friend, Drop Dead Fred, who kind of helps her through this hard time in her childhood. And so when she grows up, her and her husband are having issues. I think her husband has cheated on her in this film. And so through kind of the struggle that she is having as an adult, Drop Dead Fred comes back to try and help her get happy again. And Drop Dead Fred, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it is one of those films that when I was a kid, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was just a riot. It was so much fun to watch. Watching it as an adult it's one of those movies that you get different things, right? Like, it's like watching a Pixar film. Parts of it are definitely for kids where they wouldn't probably understand a lot of the more adult jokes. And then part of it is definitely more adult. And Drop Dead Fred is absolutely like that. I enjoy it both as an adult as much as I did when I was a child. You just get different things out of it. And it has some really good like underlying lessons of, you know, how to be yourself and how to also have boundaries and how to have self-esteem and self-respect and how you get there on your own, you know. And she has, of course, an imaginary friend that's helping her learn these lessons. But they're great lessons. They're great lessons for kids to hear. It's fun. It's just a fun story. Drop Dead Fred as her imaginary friend is not one of those imaginary friends that's like just sitting at the dinner table with you. You know, you can't sit there, my imaginary friend. Drop Dead Fred is a hoodlum. Like, he is a troublemaker in the worst possible way. I remember like my favorite part in the movie is kind of this flashback scene where she's remembering Drop Dead Fred, and he makes her what he calls a sweater stripey and essentially like helps her break into her own house and like rob her parents. And so they're carrying around like this bed sheet full of like the silver and the fancy pots and things like that. And she gets caught, you know, because her sweater ends up getting snagged on a broken window, I think. And so she has just this pile of this sweater stripey that she's holding on to. And it's so much fun. Like, he makes her life really miserable, but in a good way, in that way that sort of pushes a child's boundaries, right? To help you kind of establish. I'm not saying that kids should go out, you know, and do any of the pranks that he has her do, but it's like he kind of teaches her how to be herself, how to express herself, how to have fun in these situations where she's struggling a bit as a child. And then, in the movie, he helps her kind of do the exact same thing as an adult. She's struggling and he helps her kind of break out of that and find herself again. And it's such a good movie. And as a kid, I 1000% had the worst crush on Rick Mayall, who plays Drop Dead Fred. He plays her imaginary friend. And I thought he was just the bee's knees because he was funny and I thought very, good looking when I was little. And that combination is just always, gets me every time. And I think it's just such a fun movie. And Carrie Fisher, of course, plays like Phoebe Cates' best friend. And she just lends such good things to it. She's kind of like the voice of reason to this what would sort of seem like as the crazy friend. And I love, like, in the movie, Carrie Fisher has like a houseboat and she lets Elizabeth like live there, sort of stay there. And not to spoil it, but this is going to be a spoiler, Drop Dead Fred and Elizabeth sink this houseboat, and it becomes like this big thing where she was like, Carrie Fisher's like, I should be mad, but have you ever seen that many zeros? I would have sunk it a long time ago if I knew I would get this much money for it. It's just such a good comedy film to watch. It is a feel-good movie. You will laugh through it, I promise. So, have you seen Drop Dead Fred? If you have, please do leave a comment. I would love to hear from anyone who has seen that movie. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.